Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we connect people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed. I'm Doug Kronaizl. Thanks for being with us. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Tom Grobben. Tom's an election data researcher here at Ballotpedia, part of our team focused on expanding our election coverage down to the most local level all across the country. Today, we're diving into some of the lengths it requires us to go in order to actually expand that coverage. So, Tom, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I know that we just it's one of the strange things with our local election coverage is that I feel like this mindset that people have is that, oh, the big election season is November every single year. That's when all the action happens. But we are just coming out of kind of our own major election season of the spring. Lots of elections in April and May this year.
For us, the work really never stops.
I know, it's like these elections are just always happening, man.
Yeah, they trickle through all year long, and November is really just the icing on the cake.
I like that. That's a good way. That's the optimistic way of looking at it, the silver lining way of looking at it.
Yep.
So before we dive into things, I want to start big picture. We've been working to expand Ballotpedia's coverage of local elections over the past almost year and a half now. But when we say expand the coverage, what does that mean? Or what sort of work does that entail?
Yeah. So for us, there are two main types of elections that we might cover. The first would be what we call single source elections. So these are elections where all the information that we need, every candidate, every office, party information, it's all in one spot. Now, that might be a single file or a single web page, but the main idea is that it's all in one place, ready for us to find.
And from a finding the info standpoint, these generally make for easier elections.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we don't have to dig around. We keep track of the things that we have, the things we don't have, things like that. So sometimes these files can be big. We're talking thousands and thousands of candidates big. So that part still requires a lot of work to process. But in terms of finding the info, it's always easier if it's all in one spot.
Which brings us to the second type of elections.
That's right, the multi-source elections. So these are elections where we need to go to multiple places to find the candidate and office information.
Yeah, and so what makes an election multi-source versus single source? What's the reason behind that?
Yeah, so every state administers its elections differently. Sometimes different types of elections within the same state even are administered differently. A lot of the time, it's something like the state might have the information. Like, let's say they have all the state legislative, the congressional, and the statewide candidates. But then the counties are responsible for gathering local information. Um, and other times, it's not even the counties. Sometimes individual towns, school districts, special districts are responsible for administering their own elections.
All right, and that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's when we really get to dig, because in some instances, it can still be pretty easy. A county might just have a sample ballot posted on their website. Cool. We find that, we process that, and then we're done with that county. Uh, but when one of these sources doesn't have the information sitting around for us to just find, that's when we got to hit the phones.
And that is a great segue because I know a lot of the time those phone calls result in some pretty unique interactions. So, full disclosure to the listeners, we're chatting today about this because one of those interactions recently came up around the proverbial water cooler or as water cooler as you can get when you're all working remote, so to speak. I had had something to do with a gas station.
Yeah, the gas station. Now I'll say this story is from last year, so a little hazy on some of the when and where details.
That's fine. I mean, just give us the 1,000-foot view because this story is great.
Yeah. So this was an election where we needed to contact a town specifically. They had an election coming up, and we basically just wanted to know who's on the ballot. So I get the phone number to the town hall and start calling. I call, no answer, right? I make a note, try back again later. Later rolls around, I call again. I'm trying this a few times.
And it's just radio silence from the phone number that you found.
Yeah, I mean, some of these offices can be small. And a lot of the time, they don't have like a 9 to 5 office setup. Maybe people are there half the day, once a week, things like that. So it isn't uncommon for us to encounter radio silence. But the issue that this election was coming up, and we obviously want to get the information before the election happens.
And so enter the gas station.
Yes. So, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I really am not getting through to these people. So I go on Google Maps, plug in the address for the town hall, and that's when I see a gas station right next door. So I give the gas station a call. Someone picks up. I ask him, hey, is there an election coming up? Do you know anybody who works next door at the town hall? He tells me, yeah, there's an election. He knows, and says something like, I think they have the information posted on the bulletin board outside. Do you want me to go check it for you?
That's awesome. Deputizing the gas station attendant.
Yeah, and so I said, "That'd be great." This guy goes next door, checks out the bulletin board, relays all the candidates and office information to me.
And just like that, we are covering the election. I know I and a lot of other people at Ballotpedia really love that story because just think about how we are describing these elections, single source or multi-source. It makes it sound like there's just these two sort of binary situations. You got one thing or you got another thing, but there is a lot of gray area there,
Yeah, and especially with these multi-source elections, because sure, okay, we know we have to get info from these 10 sources, but who knows how easy it's going to be to actually get that information from those sources.
right? I mean, sometimes you find it on a website just sitting there. Sometimes you talk to the town clerk, they send you an email or they give you the information over the phone.
Yeah, and sometimes you enlist the help of a local gas station attendant. This is how it goes.
Yeah, I had a similar sort of situation in Texas a few weeks ago, which is another state where we go to the counties, but then there are some subdivisions that administer their own elections. So there was a town that we couldn't get on the phone for whatever reason. I think it was another small town with like, we're open 2 to 5 on Fridays. And then like Good Friday happened because it was like right before Easter. And so there was like 2 weeks where, where we just couldn't get a hold of them because they took Good Friday off. And so in that situation, I ended up calling a local newspaper.
Yeah, and that's a tried and true strategy. A lot of the times, those papers are required by law to publish election information.
A lot of states require those public notices for things like elections. But the thing is, those notices themselves can be hard to track down because if a newspaper is online, sometimes those notices are just appearing in the print edition. And then that totally depends on whether the paper even has an online interface in the first place. So I called the paper, and sure enough, they did have the information I was looking for. I think they had published a sample ballot or something in like the week edition beforehand. And so, we've got a good back and forth going. I want you to hit me with another scrappy or sort of creative outreach.
Yeah, so this was in Bangor, Maine, last November. So Maine is one of those states where towns administer their own elections. So I reached out to the town clerk's office, but they were just very busy preparing for the election, not taking calls. So I called the overall operator, and I think it might have been someone actually in the treasurer's office, and I asked them to walk over to the clerk's office to see if or when they'd upload a candidate list. The operator told me they're actually not planning to do that for a few weeks, which was way too long for us to wait. So I ended up trying back the next day. This time I was able to get the information from the operator after they walked down the hall to actually get it from the clerk.
Persistence pays off. Yeah, this reminds me of like another another outreach that was, I think, a similar situation where, like, like we couldn't get a hold of a county clerk or something like that, and so we called like the treasurer's office, which is in the same building, and so the treasurer's office picks up, and then we're asking about election questions, and a lot of time they want to like shift us over. They're like, "Oh, you got the wrong number. Let me transfer you." We have to like stop them and be like, "No, please, I need to talk to you." I like they're not answering the phone. I need you to walk over there and see if anybody is in the office, and if so, hand the phone to them or tell them to call me. So yeah, it's always that's another tried and true one of you know, catching somebody else at the office and making the connection that way. Now, the outreach is like one thing about it, but what about the reactions? Have you encountered any, let's say, unexpected conversations or reactions during these more kind of like unorthodox types of outreach?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just last week in Arkansas.
Oh, yes, Arkansas. First, to set the stage, in Arkansas, we got to go county by county. It's a multi-source state when it comes to local elections. So every county in Arkansas has a clerk who administers elections, has plays a role in the election administration process. But every county also has these three election commissioners, and it's either going to be, I think, like two Republicans and a Democrat, or two Democrats and a Republican, depending on the makeup of the county. I don't know the exact rules behind it, but either which way, there are these three election commissioners for every county.
Yeah. And so while it's usually pretty easy to find the election commissioner contact info online, in my experience, those phone numbers are typically their personal cell phone numbers, right? So whether or not you're going to reach them, whether or not they're working that day, that's all very much up in the air.
The stage is set. So back to your Arkansas story from last week or the week before.
Yes. Yes. So this was an instance where I had called the county clerk, but wasn't able to get the info I needed. So I turned to the commissioners and I reached out to the first one on the list, Terry. Um, sure enough, it was his personal cell, clearly. I caught him relaxing on his porch, but he promised to call me back because he was in the middle of something. So, not too long after, he called and he gave me some partial information, uh, but apologized for not knowing the specifics, like which district number the candidates were running in, things like that. So, okay, I've got some of it. I'll just have to dig a bit more to find the rest. But then, unprompted, he called me back about 10 minutes later.
All right, we'll talk about quality assistance. Where did he get that info he was missing?
Yeah, from this very same county clerk's office that I had just called, but wasn't able to get any information from.
Oh, classic. I feel like that's another like we call and they're just kind of like, who are these guys? Like, I'm not gonna. But then the election commissioner calls. They're like, oh yes, I'll be able to help you. So that's a good workaround there.
Yeah, but Terry was super helpful, and a lot of the time, those are the experiences that we encounter. Sure, there are some people, especially when we reach out on a personal cell phone, who are a little wary, like, why are you calling? Why are you asking me about this? But more often than not, if you get a hold of someone who knows the answer to your question, they're going to want to share that information with you. But Doug, you've got an Arkansas story too, right?
Oh, do I? I do. The squirrel story. This is from last spring. It was another situation where we ended up needing to call a commissioner. I forget her name off the top of my head, but I caught her on her personal cell. She was on her way to a polling location to help set things up for voting that was about to happen. But in the course of our conversation, I don't really remember how we got on this track, but in the course of our conversation, it came up that she was on top of kind of getting things set up for this upcoming election, nursing a baby squirrel back to health at home.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a lot to juggle, right? You got your statewide election, and then you got your baby squirrel you
I
have to
mean,
nurse. Yeah.
my thoughts exactly, but she was also super helpful and she said she'd call me once she got back from the polling place to let me know the information.
And
Well, I think she forgot, but that is fine because we track our outreach. So I called her back the next morning, but kind of like it was one of those situations where you call, it rings like once, and then the call stops.
ooh, you got screened.
Yeah, I think I was because it was for a good reason though. Since that was her cell phone, she texted me right afterwards and she was like, at an eye appointment or something like that, but then, like, right after that, so she texts me, she's like, "Sorry, I'm, like, at the eye doctor's office, like, waiting room or something like that." But then right after that, she sends me a text, and it's a picture of the sample ballot that she had taken on her phone the night before, but had forgotten to send to me, so I ended up getting that information as well.
But, no squirrel update?
No, in my headcanon, the squirrel is out there thriving and striving to this very day, a sort of unofficial mascot for our quest to cover these local elections. I do wanna because, like, we've been talking about personal cells and things like that, catching people. I know we had some instances in, like, Wyoming this past week or so where we're getting people on their home phones, their cell phones, things like that. Now, I wanna know from you, what's the most because when you call someone on a personal cell, you know, that means they're gonna call you back on a personal cell, and a lot of times, they're not constrained to the regular 9 to 5 office hour that you might expect if you're waiting for a call back from, like, a government employee at work at the county courthouse. So, where's the kind of strangest situation that you've been in, when you've received a call back, from some of these people that we might leave a voicemail for?
Yeah, I can be out and about, right? It's not working hours. Sometimes I take these calls in my car, right? In which case I try to get them to, email me back at some other time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard to write down candidate names when you're in the car.
yeah.
That's a lot of multitasking.
Mhm. Yes, indeed.
Well, I know that on my end, there was an instance where I mean, in their to their credit, it was not that long after the workday had ended, so it might have been, like, 6:30 or 7 or something like that, and I had left to go for a run, and so I was on a run, and then I start getting a phone call from a number, and I recognized the area code as being from whatever state we were working on because I'd called, like, a million people with that area code, like, throughout the course of the day, so, like, "Oh, no, someone's getting back to me." But I'm in the middle of a run, and so I screen their call, I'm like, "Oh, I can't really take this right now." And then they called me again, like, 5 minutes later, and I was still on the run, and at that point, I took the call, and so I probably sounded, pretty winded or whatever when I ended up getting the information from them. And same as you, I tried to kind of guide them towards my email just because, I mean, when you take the information over the phone, it's you gotta be so careful to, like, get the candidate name spelling right, things like that. You basically have to have them spell every single name out for you because we don't wanna put the wrong name up on the website. But, I mean, on that note, Tom, when you step back and you look at these stories, to you, what do they say about how our team operates and why this work we're doing matters?
Yeah, so, really what it does, it illustrates really just how personal these elections can be. And I don't mean personal in terms of like emotion, but in terms of how much election administration comes down to just a handful of people in a given place.
yeah, a handful of people in a given place, but then you multiply that by the tens of thousands of places that are holding elections every single year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are thousands of these people who wake up, they get dressed, they go to work in a way that makes these elections possible. People might think elections are all very standardized, cut and dry. They happen on this day and that day, in this way and only this way. But that's really just not the case. Elections are very decentralized. They're happening everywhere all of the time. We've covered at least one election every week this year, haven't we?
Oh yeah, yep, that is right, and that is not uncommon. And I like what you said about how many people probably think elections work because to me, these stories illustrate, yeah, the variety at play here. And on the flip side, we at Ballotpedia are also just people who wake up, get dressed. Maybe we get dressed a little bit more casually as we are working from home, and we go to work. So these stories also help illustrate the reality of what it takes to cover these elections. And yeah, I think that that's kind of like the full picture. You've got on the one end, we've got these interactions with people who are all over the country doing all sorts of things, getting information however we can. And then on the return side, you know, we're also here making those calls, tracking those people down, and doing whatever we can to expand that local election coverage. Well, Tom, yeah, I mean, we probably have more local election officials to call. So I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to come chat and say hi to the next gas station attendant or squirrel you come across for me.
Yeah, absolutely, I will. And thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and for our listeners, you can learn more about our expanded local election coverage in 2025 at the link in our show notes. We'll be back next week with another episode. Make sure you subscribe to On the Ballot wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Doug Kronaizl, and thanks for listening.